Now it's live.
Now it's live. Hi, welcome back. It's Mark Littlewood. I understandably, and please forgive me, I'm getting very, very excited about Business and Software USA next week. It's the 10th. It's the 10th one.
Back to Boston.
Back to Boston, and can't wait. I'm going with my wife this time, not the children, so we'll have a little time away as well. Yeah, going to be a fantastic lineup, and looking forward to seeing you again as well, Matthew. Matthew is our AMA victim today. He's the CEO of Yesware, and talk to us about mindfulness at work. Let's say hello, Matthew, and then do please tell us a little bit about your talk last year.
Hi, Mark. Hi, everybody. Hi, Joe. It's great to be back in the virtual BoS community here. Last year, I was privileged to give a talk about mindfulness at work, and the title of the talk was called "Mind the Gap." You all have heard about all the mindfulness programs that are being taught internationally at big multinational corporations like Intel and Google and GE and many others. And maybe some of you practice mindfulness now, and maybe some of you practice mindfulness at work or have some aspect of mindfulness in your job. The talk that I wrote last year, which you can see on video, is really about a personal experience that I had that sort of highlighted for me the benefits of a mindful approach to work, if not a particular practice of mindfulness at work. It was really about these two guys who came to me, sort of young guns in the sales team, who came to me and were basically like, "I don't think you're doing the right thing." And my first reaction was like, what do you know? And then my second reaction was like, all right, wait a minute, let's give him a chance. And it struck me that I felt myself becoming incredibly grateful for the mindfulness practice and training that I've had that allowed me, in a sense, to sort of pause and stop and take a breath before I just lashed back out at them. So that's what the talk is about. And in general, I'm just fascinated by this topic, so I'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, it's a fantastic. It was a fantastic talk. It's a fantastic topic. So you just tell us a little bit about your background, because you slightly kind of found yourself before you got going.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up in the East Coast, and sort of found myself in college at Brown University. And I had a little bit of an early midlife crisis, in a sense. I was sort of the 20-year-old kid who was, I could see the track that I was on, and I was afraid of getting there. I knew that if I continued on that track, I was going to wake up at age 45 or 50, like I am now, and have a midlife crisis, basically, and divorce my wife and go marry a trophy bride and get a red convertible and be a Trump supporter. And I just, I didn't want to go there. I didn't want to be that guy. And so that inspired me to sort of drop that for a little while and go and figure out, what's important to me, what really makes a difference and what matters in my life, and how I thought I could grow as a human being. And that was the start of sort of finding a mindfulness practice. That was back in the early 90s, 1990, I guess.
Wow. And was that a long process? Was that something that took a while to work out? Was it something that you were doing exclusive to other things?
It was a long process, and it sort of continues now. I mean, I feel like, although I've found a practice that works for me, I feel like I'm still very much on that journey. But I tried a lot of different things. And I was sort of wandering around. I lived in Boulder, Colorado. I lived in San Francisco. I lived up in the San Juan Islands of Washington State. I worked in restaurants to support this sort of wandering, and worked as a waiter and a cook and a maitre d' and everything, just to sort of get by while I tried to figure out what the hell it was I was doing. And it was it was fun, actually. I mean, I was a little kid, wandering about in the world, but it was also kind of confusing and pretty unsettled at times. So I feel like, luckily, I found something that works for me. And then I was able to sort of bring that together with my professional aspirations.
Wow.
Oh, Fiona had a question.
So yeah, this is a very good question. She always has good questions, actually.
Hi, Fiona.
Hey, is there anything in particular you'd say mindfulness is useful for in the workplace, i.e. particular situations? I love the examples she gives. Or the first one in particular, sales meetings, presentations, etc.
Yeah, so first let me just talk about what I think mindfulness is at a general level. Mindfulness is not a religious practice. It's a very human thing. It's basically a person's ability to put their mind on a particular situation. So just the ability to like concentrate on something. And it could be anything. It could be the screen in front of me. It could be, making a table. It could be having a conversation with someone. It could be driving to work. Any of these things that we do have the, if we put our attention on them, become mindful things. So it's a very human thing. It's not associated with a particular religion or spiritual tradition in any way. And anyone who's any good at anything that they do is necessarily mindful because they've put their attention on this thing that they're working on. So if you're sending an email to a speaker to say, would you come and speak at BoS, and you're paying attention to that, you're being mindful of that email. So that's sort of how I think about mindfulness. And in that context, I think Fiona's question is sort of implying the answer, which is that there doesn't have to be anything in particular that's good to be mindful of in the workplace, but basically everything at the workplace is a reminder to be mindful. So the thing that you're working on, if you're a programmer, it's the next line of code or the design of the code you're writing. If you're a marketing person, it's the A/B test that you're running or the messaging of the product message that you're putting out, etc. Everything as an individual contributor at work is interesting enough to be mindful, hopefully, to be mindful of. But the most interesting parts at work, I find, are the interactions between people, the meetings or the sales presentations or the time when 2 people or 3 people or groups of people are working on stuff. That's where it gets really juicy. That's where people's understandings and agendas and beliefs and confusion all sort of mix together. And at that point, if you can bring mindfulness to those kind of rich situations, then the world can kind of open up.
What do you mean by that? What do you mean by that?
Well, so much of what we do at work is feels like ping pong. It's like habitual approach, like your view of what's happening, my view of what's happening, her view of what's happening, his view of what's happening, and we just kind of bounce around.
Yeah.
You say something which reminds me of the thing that you said 3 weeks ago, which really pissed me off back then, but I didn't say it then, so then I lash back at you because you reminded me of that thing, and back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And there's not a lot of room for space or creativity in that environment. You can't actually come up with new ideas when you're always ping-ponging back and forth. So being mindful of that situation and bringing some awareness of that conversation and how you feel, how your body feels, how what your state of mind is incredibly helpful in those situations. And you see it often in meetings. There's often someone in a meeting who can just say, whoa, 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 everybody, hey, hang on, hang on 1 second. Let's step back. Let's remember what we're here for. They don't say it. Maybe they do say it, like, let's just take a breath. Maybe we should take 5 minutes. Those kind of people are the people that are reminding us, hey, let's take a different perspective. We're sort of caught up in the, so if you can bring that level of mindfulness about your body and your emotions and the environment to a tense meeting or a dynamic meeting, it becomes very, very powerful.
Very interesting. And have your senior team been encouraged to be more mindful? Do they have an active program? Does everybody kind of buy into this? How's that changed interactions?
So we don't we don't require mindful discipline or practice here. I think it's problematic to sort of mandate something like this.
Mm.
So what we try to do, and what I try to do personally, is just encourage it. We encourage it by having a room where people can come and practice, by having classes of different types, so a yoga class and a Pilates class and a sitting meditation class and things like that here, so that people get the resources they need and the support they need to try it and practice. And then I just keep talking about it, and try to encourage people to try it. And we do little things, little rituals throughout the week that hopefully underline it, but we don't require it.
Gotcha. Have there ever been situations where that's created a conflict or been an issue?
Like people feel like they're being proselytized to or something?
No, just I suppose if generally people are more mindful in the environment of their work at Yesware, if there are people that haven't kind of bought into that, does that create sort of edge conflicts there, or is it does it become sort of two groups? How does it work?
I think there's two areas that becomes really interesting. One is for the new people. We're hiring lots of people, and so new people come in and they've heard about it, and they know this is a thing because it's in the interview process and stuff. But living it is so different, and so there's an adjustment period for new people, and then I think there's an interesting set of beliefs around what mindful work looks like and how the environment looks. I think people tend to think, oh, it means peacefulness. Oh, it means there's never any conflict. Oh, it means things are, everyone's really nice to each other.
Yeah.
Which is sort of true, but it doesn't mean there's no conflict. It doesn't mean that we don't agree, we disagree on things, And oftentimes that can cause some cognitive dissonance in people. Hey, I'm feeling stressed, like I'm feeling busy. I'm really working hard here, but I thought this was kind of going to be like a and it's not. It's a startup. Like people work hard. There's pressure for sure.
Yeah, yeah. And I'm just bring things back a little bit to the startup. You at the beginning of this year, you sent out an email to your free users saying that you were going to kind of migrate them away from free, which makes perfect sense. Can you talk a little bit about how that went and how that's gone for you?
Sure. So we were a freemium business model for the first 5 years or so of existence, which meant that if you decided not to sign on to pay for Yesware, you could still keep using it for free. We had about 100,000 people that were doing that.
Wow.
And on one level, I thought the whole idea was like, hey, they might be using it for free, but they're contributing to the business in other ways. They're helping us find bugs. They're spreading the word. They might convert at some point. But, and after 5 years of this, I think we just decided like, it's not going to work. They're not going to convert. They're just using our free software. And that was good for a little while, but at some point, so we just decided, we got to cut you guys off. Hope you pay for it. Here's a special deal. Thanks for your use. I appreciate it. But it's been awesome, actually. It's been awesome because we've been able to devote many more resources to the paying customers and understand much more about what they need. So it's helped us focus a lot.
That's fascinating. So of the free customers, can you give a number on the percentage of conversions?
It was very high, actually. It was about 12%.
Wow.
Who converted to paid, which is much higher than I thought it was going to be. Which is just a testimony to the fact that we have good software, so it works.
Yeah.
But barring our intervention, the people were happy to keep using it for free.
Yeah, no, I agree. I thought it was a very nicely written email, actually. And
thank you.
I think it's one of those things that a lot of companies are struggling a little bit with, or are going to struggle a little bit with, is that they have so many free users that they have to support and do this and that for the for all the right reasons, it does become a big distraction. So
I wish we hadn't had a free program to start, actually. I wish we had ended it earlier, so we could have focused more on the paying customers earlier, but
interesting.
didn't learn.
Oh, well, you should take some time next week at BoS in Boston to catch up with a lady called Laura Roda from Meet Edgar, who has always just had a paid version of Meet Edgar, and it's doing really well at the moment. I think it's sort of 3 million annual run rate and growing, and self-funded right from the beginning. So it did mean that she had to make some quite big decisions early on in terms of product, but I guess some of them worked out. Hey, here we go. Do you know Glenda?
Thanks, Glenda.
Glenda Gillett. Gillett. There you are.
We've never met, but I appreciate the support, Glenda.
So, James McClave. Hey, Matthew. How do you go about appreciating the moments between the big events? I think you called it the gap. I think you did. How do you not blow your own mind constantly by consciously having to step back and look at the big picture all the time? It's quite a big one.
It's a very good question. I think part of that is the mindful practice, is actually the practice of coming back. So mindfulness practice, if mindfulness is the ability to hold your mind on a particular thing, mindfulness practice is a discipline where you train your mind to keep coming back to the present moment. You have a thing that you're concentrating on or you're putting your attention on. And when your mind goes off, you say, hey, bring it back to this thing. I use my breath, but there's lots of different things you can do. And through that practice, I think the experience of coming back to the present moment becomes less of a big deal. So your mind is not blown. And in fact, it becomes pretty boring. You're still sitting in the room. You're still sitting there, and you're still sitting there. And it's, it's actually very normal what we do, living in our world. Being present is very normal and quite boring in a beautiful, special, ordinary way. So I think, James, that not blow your own mind part is just like getting habituated to being back in the moment. It's not a big deal.
Gotcha. This was a great one. From Glenda, a follow-up, actually a question. No problem. On mindfulness again, what would be your top tips for taking it up? I guess everyone says they're too busy. Likewise, what are the big 3 payoffs for you?
Yeah, everyone is too busy for sure. It's amazing, I find myself feeling too busy all the time. But if you sort of take inventory of how you spend your days, you'll find there are all kinds of slices of time when you're actually not doing much of anything productive. My signal to myself is like when I find myself checking email on the toilet, or checking Twitter, I'm like, all right, that's enough. I've gone too far. Put that phone away. Just be mindful on the toilet if that's what it takes. You know what I mean? I think the finding of support is very helpful. Finding other people that are interested in being or practicing mindfulness is very helpful. Reading books is helpful. There are some wonderful books by mindfulness teachers across various traditions. There are a couple good apps that I would recommend. There's one called Headspace, which I really like.
Yeah, you recommended that last year, and you're still using it. So that's another. How long had you had it for? I think it was relatively new.
Yeah, I think I've had it now for 18 months, and I don't use that every day, but it's a great mindfulness application. And there are other good ones too. There are several other good ones. So investigating supports like that, whether it's another person or an app or an online community, all those really help. But yeah, I mean, The three big payoffs for me, hard to say, because I feel like I think the single biggest one is just appreciating my life. I don't feel like it's just blowing by. I feel an intense sense of gratitude for appreciating, my time with my kids, time with my family, my wife,
Yeah.
time with my workmates. That's the biggest one.
Wow. Well, that's a pretty powerful answer. I think go for it, Glenda.
Yeah, and Glenda, by the way, or anybody online, if you want to chat about this one-on-one, like just send me an email, matthew@yesware.com, and we can talk about it. I can send you some links.
Brilliant. Thank you. Just to follow up from, I think, some of your earlier comments, just wanted to say after your BoS talk, I started using mindful techniques. This is true. This is Joe, my colleague. More when I needed them than religiously, really helped. And yeah, certainly I think Headspace is one of those things that Joe does quite, not every day, but regularly, and finds it really good. Follow up from James Plath, how much of mindfulness has to be called mindfulness? And I think what James is getting at here is it a sort of a name for something else that we all do anyway?
I think it is a name for something we all do anyway. I think James is right. I think being considerate is a good way to say it, or consider the moment. I think the difference is that mindfulness as a vocabulary word has a set of practices associated with it you can actually work on. Actually you can be considerate and work on being considerate, but there's a whole body of literature and human experience which has been codified into a set of systems that help you get better at something. And that's really helpful for people who want to explore this. There's a sense of a path. Whereas being considerate is like, well, everyone knows they should be considerate. We're not always considerate. I want to be more considerate. How do I do that? Like that works. You could follow that train of thought. But the practices involved and the teachings involved with mindfulness are actually quite deep. I've been reading this book, if you don't mind me diverging, but I've been reading this book about meditation that was written in 1450.
Wow.
And it's, when I read it now and compare it to the things that I read on, online now, it struck me that a lot of people back in those days, especially in India and China and Tibet and Japan, were engineers, and they were engineering exploration of the mind. They were trying to figure out how the mind works. They weren't as interested in how material things work. They were much more interested in how the mind works and emotions, relationships. And so these meditation books from way back then are very engineering heavy, actually. And that's why I think you find that a lot of engineers are into mindfulness practices, because it is about figuring out how your mind works.
Wow, that's fascinating. I think it's interesting you say that. I've had this, and I suppose, a passing interest in neuroscience for a long time, and I suppose that's reflected quite often in the curation of the speakers and the talks that we do at BoS. And I remember a couple of years ago, I counted all the slides, and we had one slide over 2.5 days that had code, and I think 210 slides that had a human brain
Wow.
on it. And I suppose it's all about how human beings interact, isn't it? And the brain must have some kind of scientific rigor behind it. We're responding to different chemical elements and different things going on, but I don't think we've come anywhere close to understanding the real mechanisms that are driving it and being able to control that. I think the drugs and things we have at the moment are very blunt instruments.
Yeah. Well, the business of software is necessarily a group endeavor. Even if you're a solo genius who creates an app, you're selling to customers, you're distributing through channels, you have partners of some kind, and most of the people that come to your conference and most of the people who work, frankly, are working in teams. And so code itself becomes an important component, but really only a component of a successful or fun or interesting or thoughtful, inspiring company. And actually the culture of the companies is the thing that really makes them successful or not. So it's not surprising at all to hear you say that, like, people are trying to figure out how I feel, how you feel in relationship, how we work together, how we can be more effective. Then we add a third person and a fourth and a 10th and a 100th. And suddenly you get to scale, and the organism takes on its own dynamic and becomes a player in a larger ecosystem. So it's quite, it makes a lot of sense that your speakers would focus on that, because that's probably the most important thing.
Yeah, very interesting. Well, very, very, very interesting feedback, actually. What's happening with your business at the moment? Because you're venture funded, aren't you? Or angel venture funded?
We're venture funded. We've raised about $35 million so far.
Wow.
My first business was bootstrap, so I've sort of seen both sides of it. And we're about 75, 80 people now, and growing quickly, and good customers, and keep working on making the software better. And it feels like a very dynamic market right now. It's fun.
Right, brilliant. And what's the thing you're most excited about at the moment?
Well, in about 3 weeks, we'll release a new set of features called Touch Points, which is all about basically building a smart to-do list for salespeople, so that they don't have to keep track of the next thing to do for each of these accounts and prospects they're working on. Yesware will just tell them, based on your business rules, what's happening in your database and what's happening in real time, like what to do next. So I think it could really change the way salespeople do their job.
It could remove salespeople from many operations, couldn't it?
The things that they don't need to be doing, like trying to remember all the lists of next things to do.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. What's the thing you're most concerned about, and what's the biggest risk for Yesware?
I think the biggest risk for us is like an execution risk. We don't live in a world where we are dependent on a particular thing to make or break our business. It's really up to us to get it done. And so with a small group of people in a big growing ecosystem, we got to climb to the top of the mountain. And so it's a risk. I think we'll make it. But
do you think, are you aiming to be the platform in the ecosystem that everybody's building around?
So I don't ever think we'll be, I don't think we'll ever be the single platform or the single sales solution for everybody, because there's tens and hundreds of millions of salespeople in the world. But I think we'll be the number one.
That's interesting. So then exit to Salesforce.
Maybe. that seems like a reasonable, sort of thing. And I have a great amount of respect for that company, but I don't particularly want to sell it. I love what I do, and I love the team. So I'd rather just keep going from here.
Yeah, interesting. So what's the main difference between running a bootstrap business, where presumably you had a lot more control and a lot more say, over running a venture-backed one where you've got some fairly significant investment and therefore other?
It's funny. I don't feel like that's the big difference for us anyway. Maybe it's because my investors are good investors. They don't really tell us much of anything to do. Sometimes I wish they would tell me more about what to do. But they're sort of like they're happy with the way we're running the business. They certainly have suggestions, and they've been helpful. But in terms of the responsibility, it's sort of all on our shoulders. The big difference is that we can grow faster, i.e., we can hire more people ahead of our revenue. So we've been able to hire many more people than we would have been just fueled by revenue, and that has upsides and downsides. The obvious upside is like, wow, we can build more stuff than we could otherwise. The downside is that, like, we're losing money every month. We still are losing money every month. Yeah. So that's that puts a different kind of pressure on the business.
Do you have a sense that capital will be harder to come by?
In general, it depends on the stage of your business. In general, for brand new businesses, it's still very easy. For mid-stage businesses, it's harder, i.e. like A's and B's are getting harder. And then growth capital is just as easier, if not easier than ever. So there's a big winnowing out in the A and B rounds right now. But angel funding is still relatively available, as far as I've heard.
Yeah, that certainly seems to be the sense that I get. Actually, in most clusters, I think over in the valley, it is getting a little harder, but it always has been a little harder. And I think there are still more funds kind of coming in, and certainly over in London as well. Is there a point where, I mean, on the burn rate at the moment that you need to raise, or are you moving towards profitability, and that's the goal now?
Yeah, when we raised our C round last summer, we decided that this was going to be the money we needed to get to cash flow break even. So we're on track for that, and we just had a board meeting 2 weeks ago, and we're doing well towards those goals. So
Great.
I think it'll be an option for us to raise. I think we might raise again, but it'll be because we want to, not because we need to.
Yeah. Do you think there's going to be a kind of a funding crisis coming, or is this as bad as it gets?
You mean like a sort of dislocation of capital markets and like what we saw in 2008?
Exactly.
If I knew, Mark. But it doesn't feel that way to me. I think it could happen, certainly, but right now it doesn't feel like we've overinflated any particular aspect of the economy. I think people have built relatively sound businesses, and I lived through the 2000, 2001, real internet crash as well.
Yes.
It doesn't feel like either that or the 2008 one. So it seems pretty solid.
Yeah, well, you say the real crash. Actually, looking back on it, if you look at some of the valuations, they weren't nearly as punchy as some of the ones today. But it just sort of goes to show how the game's changed, doesn't it?
Oh, I think they were much punchier than they are today. I mean, I think that GeoCities going public with $2 million in revenue, and the telecoms bubble was even bigger than the internet bubble back then. So I think in general, the unicorns that we have now are much better businesses than the ones that we had back then. Even though I'm very skeptical of unicorns in general.
Excellent. So Fiona asks, will you be at BoS this year, Matthew?
Yes, I will.
Excellent.
I assume you will too, Fiona. So
I think she will be. So so that's actually happening next week for anyone that's come in late. It's one of the reasons that we're so excited. I think Matthew's just having a sit down and a moment of mindfulness before he enters the maelstrom of BoS next week.
I do recommend that, actually. It's good to just take a minute, because then you can appreciate the maelstrom you're about to go into.
Absolutely. No, my sister got married a couple of weekends ago, and the only piece of advice that anyone ever gave us when we got married, and the only piece of advice I gave her, was just spend some time consciously with your wife. Just hide yourself away in a room and live the day together rather than just run around, because it's kind of a classic situation where you're zooming around. You're looking after everyone and you don't spend enough time together.
Right.
Great. Okay. Look, really, really great to talk to you. Thoroughly appreciated you sharing your thoughts on mindfulness with us at BoS last year, and I'm really, really excited to be seeing you on Sunday evening or something for the reception and registration.
Hey, Glenda, if I could just touch on that last question about
here we go.
Convincing not naturally minded people to try it out. I don't think you have to. I don't think you can necessarily. It's a branding problem, but some people think of it as fluffy, but I think you just have to do what's right for yourself, and it'll work out.
Embrace the fluff.
I don't think at the end of the day mindfulness turns out to be very fluffy at all. Actually, I think it turns out to be pretty grounded and real. I just think people think of it that way because they've never tried it or whatever, but that's not really your problem.
Yeah. Go for it, Glenda.
Try it out. Yeah, you're good.
I'm not sure I know. I'm not sure we've met. So it would be great to know a bit more about what you were thinking of, Glenda. All right, Matthew, thanks so much for joining us. Great to talk to you. Look forward to seeing you next week at the 10th Business of Software USA.
Sounds great. All right.
We're getting
Thanks,
very
Mark.
excited. Thanks so much, Matthew. Bye-bye.
Bye.